Welcome to the Sky Talk Doc podcast, where we navigate life, relationships, and everything in between with thought-provoking curiosity and a touch of grace. Buckle up, Buttercup. This is a flight you won't forget. Before we get into today's podcast and our amazing guest, I just want to tell you, you're not broken. You're just wired for survival in a world that doesn't always feel safe. Maybe you keep people at a distance because deep down you don't feel very lovable, or maybe you overachieve because a part of you believes you're not enough. But that's not weakness. It's your brain doing its best to protect an old wound. But here's the thing. What protected you then might be sabotaging you now. If you're tired of the same arguments, same spirals, or feeling unseen in your relationships, take the 7 Primal Wounds quiz at 7primalwounds.com to find out what your wound is and stop the same crappy patterns, chaos, and relationship conflict today. Good morning, Dr. Patrick. Welcome to the Sky Talk Doc podcast. I have been waiting for this podcast since August. I cannot wait to talk to you about changing a billion brains and all the things that you're doing. I mean, it's absolutely fascinating. And I also have some very exciting questions for you about youth and the impact that certain things like homework and stuff like that have on developing brains. And you are just going to be a wealth of information. I know that. Perhaps you can share with the listeners a little bit about your journey, how you got where you are, and all the things that you're doing in brain development.
Sure. Well, for those kids, my first book was called Awaken the Genius, because when I started, I was 12 years old. My dad was a Silva instructor. The Silva method helped him stop drinking. So he became a meditation leader. And I was the child kid, that couldn't learn. I was the artist. I didn't want to be in school. But he taught me a few really good things. Maybe during the podcast we can talk about those. But the main thing was that I went from being I took second grade 2 years in a row because I think Sister Barbara loved me a lot and wanted me back. But I graduated almost top of my class and now I have 2 PhDs. Obviously my brain wasn't developed at that time. So how you develop it, we'll talk a little bit about that. But then later on, as I call them God winks, God put me together with a company called Light and Sound Research. Back in the 80s, we created the very first personal light and sound machine. All the frequency things that people hear out there, we were the first ones. In 1989, we got a Gadget of the Year with the Consumer Electronics Show, but we were like aliens from another planet. There was no cell phones, no downloads. And here we have this machine that trains the brain to go into these different states. And then I started a franchise company and then we sold that in 2002, thought I was retired, but 2008 happened. And so here we are. In 2012, I decided to upgrade the whole technology, put it all into one headset. And now we have 3,000 clinics out there using BrainTap across America. We have 120,000 users. We're looking to better a billion brains, like you said. And I feel like every day is my first day of school. I'm smelling the erasers, the new ink in the books, and I'm just excited to be here. So thanks for having me.
Well, there's so much that's finally coming out in terms of neuroscience. And I find it fascinating that you got 2 PhDs because, I've finished one and there are times where I think, I need a little bit more on this. And it always seems that I go for another degree when I'm trying to solve my own mysteries. But I'm curious, what do you see in terms of recently with kind of this maybe instant gratification culture? What I've noticed is even my podcasts, they used to be an hour and a half long. I'm running them for 25, 30 minutes because it seems people don't have the attention spans. How is, social media and all these different things affecting?
Yeah, you're exactly right. They say that the average person has the same attention as a goldfish, about 4 to 5 seconds, and you see your reels, those are and social media is doing it. The Christmas card I love to get is the one that says, hey, I hope your life is as good as your social media post, because nobody's posting their bad news, right? So here we go. What's happening is most people just want the facts right now. Then they move on. They're looking for something fast, easy. I mean, we used to do long form videos. Now they want 9 seconds or 15 seconds. So you got to, and TED Talks kind of changed that too, 15-minute talks. So you have all this going on and people have lost the ability to think. That's the biggest problem because they're getting up, they're watching the news, they're looking at their social media. They don't know how to think. They're just looking for what to think. And I think that's where we need the brain fitness the most, is to challenge people to, I love devices. I'm a technology guy. I'm a geek from way back. But the reality is that our brain is not designed for the life we're living right now. Our brain is designed to have stress at the levels we have it daily, maybe 3 to 5 times a week, when a tiger would come up or we'd fall off a cliff or we couldn't find food or whatever's going on. And most people don't realize that all of that genetic memory This is now science. It's not belief. So if anyone wants to, you don't have to believe me. This is all science. MIT came out and said that 7 generations of our ancestors are influencing us right now. Then they came back and said 54. I think they're going to go back to the very beginning of time, because the reality is the Hopi Indians said this over 200 years ago. They said our 7 generations of our ancestors. So this is weird. MIT in neuroscience is sounding more and more like the Vedas than it is science literature.
Yeah,
And so I think the main thing is that people, they're being controlled. They don't realize that those ads are coming up for a reason. Somebody's listening, and we have this thing called dopamine, right, in our beta brain. And this dopamine never gets satisfied. Most people don't realize that. There's no satisfaction in dopamine. It's an adjutant. It just gets you to do something. So I have a favorite saying for people. You have to learn there's no there. There's no final satisfaction. You've got to enjoy the journey. And whatever the journey is, that becomes the satisfaction, because that's why I think in a lot of sacred literature it says, do the thing without thinking of the result of the thing. So they're saying the same thing, but a little bit different language. Our brain, the reward centers don't happen the way people think. Like people go, why do you keep smoking? Why do you keep drinking? Why do you keep doing drugs? Well, they're chasing that high that they're never going to get until they figure out that they have the most powerful pharmacy on earth between their ears. 30,000 different neurochemicals can be released with a simple thought. So let's learn to use this powerful brain we have. And one thing that's really incredible, 5 weeks ago, MIT came out with a study that showed our thoughts. When you think a thought, and I think a thought, they extend out away from our body up to 10,000 miles. And they said it goes into a web very similar to the internet. Yeah. So this sounds a lot like consciousness. So here we go. And so that's when somebody says, why do you want to better 1 billion brains? I said, imagine if you change your brain frequency so you are a more calm, relaxed, positive person. Because if you look at life as a challenge, you actually produce 200 times more light energy at the mitochondrial level. We can measure light emitting from the body. Every person out there, there's something called the electron transport chain. Most people don't realize what that means. It means that you are light. Your body converts everything into light energy, stimulates the cells. It makes ATP, which creates oxygen, nitric oxide, vasodilation, blood flow circulation. And all this magic happens while you're doing what you need to do. Bruce Lipton said, I'm the dean of brain-based medicine at Quantum University too, and we bring Bruce Lipton out all the time. And Bruce says 95% of your life is controlled by your subconscious. I said, no, Bruce, 99.9999999 to the infinite power, because we don't do squat. In fact, for the listeners, they've actually proven in science you do more thinking when you sleep than when you're awake. So that's why sleep is so important. We can talk about that in neuroscience and what's happening, and why screens in general and just the stimulus people have all day long is keeping them from that great night's sleep.
You just dumped like a year's worth of wealth of information in 10 minutes. I am so impressed. And there's so much that I want to talk about. Epigenetics, one of the things you mentioned. And I often even think about, humans were not meant to go cheetah speeds. And yet we're doing it every day, multiple times a day for extended periods of time. That has to have some effect on our ability, reduce the cortisol, relax, all of those things. I mean, even a cheetah only bursts and then rests, right? And we
are more like a cheetah, but we're not supposed to go full max speed. What most people don't realize is that we need rejuvenation. Like Tom Brady is one of our top users, and he tells people the reason he uses it for recovery. In their system, the TBRX, they talk about for every 1 minute of exertion, you need 2 minutes of recovery. Yeah. So imagine in ancient times, if you and I were at the tribe and we said, I'm going to go hunt today. And you said, I'm going to go gather. And so we're going to meet back here at 2:00. We didn't work past 2:00. If we got caught in the dark, we were part of the food chain.
Right.
So we'd come back to the tribal village, right? And what we would do is we would take a nap usually. Then we'd get up around the tribal fire and we'd download the wisdom of the tribe. Hey, the berries are over here, the buffalo are over here, whatever it was, we would do that. And then, but what most people don't know is they were biohacking, because that fire burns at 10 hertz frequency. And while you're sitting here, every cell of your body has something called a mirror neuron. This mirror neuron is listening to everything that's happening around you. I mean, and we'll talk about that in epigenetics, everything around you, because they proved, and I'll go back to this, but they proved with DNA, that if I could take your DNA, Doc, and I could stick it to the floor, it would reach to Pluto, and it's inside you right now. And they say it's a viscous material that absorbs light energy from the center of the universe and broadcasts those codes into the body. Now, science knows we do this with the sun. They call it the circadian rhythm. If we don't get to bed by 10 o'clock, we don't make as much melatonin. If we don't get to bed by 11, we don't clean our liver. Now, how does our body know that? It knows it because the universe is code-based and it's light sensitive. Light, sound, and vibration is what makes the world go round. So back to the fire for a moment, and then we'll get on to the next question because I know we got limited time. When you go back to the fire, you're standing in front of the fire. It's not Netflix. When that fire burns out, you don't go get another log. You go to bed. But that fire is burning at around somewhere between 440, 850 nanometers. This is what our body loves. It absorbs this light energy. When it enters into the cells, you can do this with red light therapy, brain tap headset. There's a lot of ways to do it. But what happens is it travels through the bloodstream and finds a cell that's dying. It's called apoptosis. If it can get there before that cell dies, it absorbs that light energy. And what they showed was it restarts something called the Krebs cycle. And the cell remembers its baby self. It remembers what it was the moment it was conceived. So imagine you can rejuvenate your life by getting more light. That's why going outside in the sun is so important, seeing sunrises and sunsets. But every night they would do this. And then that, with that 10 hertz frequency, you're down-regulating your nervous system. The problem is people get locked in something called sympathetic syndrome. That's the fight or flight. So they have this stress, that stress. There's a cool picture I'm going to use in my talks from now. And we were walking through the mall and Santa's sitting there. He's got his hat off. He's looking at his cell phone. And I always say, the problem is, there's Santa. He's taking a break with his cell phone, right? But if you look at your life as a threat rather than a challenge, every time you look at that cell phone, your biological system responds. It doesn't know you're looking at a cell phone. It simply knows there's an emotional reaction to that. And automatically it sends a signal to the liver that says, dump those 25 grams of sugar you've been housing. And then when it does that, it says, there's no place for the sugar to go. You're just sitting here looking at a phone. Your muscles are full of sugar. So then it says, okay, we need that fat storage hormone now, pump that out. And then it pumps all the sugar into the adipose tissue. And then an hour later, when you're hungry, you go, I can't believe I'm hungry. Well, that's because you have insulin resistance, because the body is conditioned through stress. That's why stress is the biggest reason we have all this weight problem. And we need to look, if you look at life as a challenge, though, you might not have that problem. Like some people, they thrive in that environment and physically they actually do well. In what they showed during COVID, which is an incredible, I think they've taken it off the internet now, but I used to send people there. What it showed was because we can measure photic exchange from the body. Your heart center actually produces more energy than any other part of the body that projects out of you up to 18 feet. And what they showed was people that looked at COVID as a threat over people that looked at it as a challenge actually produced 200 less energy. So think of that energy as the codes that tell your body what to do. So now your defenses, your immune system is down, all these things. And that epigenetic thing you were talking about, if you look at life as a threat, your body, they've actually proven this in science now. It's not a belief, it's a true scientific fact. Your body actually down-regulates every DNA pair. And it does it, in 2003 when they said, hey, we mapped the human genome. And then they said 99% of us is junk. And everybody's going, what do you mean junk? Well, we did 1%. Give us a Nobel Peace Prize. In 2018, they actually got technology that could measure and found out we have switches on those cells that either upregulate or downregulate. So imagine if you get with a challenge and you're a negative person, your body actually handicaps you to prove to you that you can't do it. But if you look at it as a challenge and say, hey, how am I going to do this? Your body upregulates. And now you have these superpowers that people talk about to handle stress, to handle difficult situations, difficult people. And so our body is listening and it changes every cell. Since we started this podcast, you have changed thousands of times and you have died thousands of times because your cells are changing at 50 million cells per second. So death is nothing. Our body knows what death is. You're not the same person you were 7 years ago. Your whole body has changed, but people want to hold on to past behaviors. So one thing I want to tell the listeners, imagine I'm Superman and you're an interviewer and we meet for the first time. I pull out kryptonite and I set it on the table. I said, kryptonite is what makes me feel weak and you can destroy me if you use kryptonite. Well, he would never do that. He would put it in a lead box, put it in the vault. He doesn't tell everybody about I'm an alcoholic or I have a weight problem or poor me, my mom and dad did this to me. I tell people those are like leftovers when you find them in the back of the refrigerator. When you open them up, they're green and fuzzy. You don't send it off to CSI. You throw it away. It serves no one and it doesn't serve you. So we want to upregulate, realize that your past, there's never been a superhero that didn't walk through the dark night of the soul. So imagine you're getting your superpowers right now. Now, if you're already on the other side of it, congratulations, you've got your superpower. Now you've got to go use it in the world because that's where that connection comes in. Like Blue Zone said, a community is actually more than 25% of your health. In people out there that are afraid of losing their brains, which is what a lot of people are right now, it's the biggest fear is losing your memories. They said that if you have a social network, you have a 37% less chance of getting dementia or Alzheimer's. So imagine, just go out there and have fun, talk to people. I'm not talking about social media. I'm talking about actually face-to-face, having conversations. And if you don't know anybody, this is your chance to go into social work and service work, because there's a lot of people that need your help, and that you're going to get the payoff. The thing is that when people go, why would that person who's got $1 billion or whatever do all this nonprofit stuff? Because they're getting a neurological payoff, and they're getting a chemical payoff. Those good endolupins and brain chemicals, there's thousands of dollars worth of, you can't take those as pills. Your body produces it though, on call, on command, and it's magical.
Yeah, there's a book called The Invisible Bucket that I read to the kids, where every time you fill up someone else's bucket, yours also gets filled up. But you're talking about biophotons, and one of the things, like the light energy that we emit and all of that. And one of the things that I share a lot with my clients is how adept the human brain is at receiving data subconsciously, consciously, while you're going about your breathing, and it's processing all of this information, even micro bits, minutia data about how somebody smells, or some smell in the house or whatever. It is constantly scanning for threats. And I see this when I'm working a lot with couples, that if you've lived together for 10, 15, 20 years, it doesn't take any work for your brain to pick up on a slight shift in the emotional state of your partner to put you in a flight or fight state even. And so the importance of this, and as I'm sitting here, I'm going through one of what I would say is single-handedly the most stressful time in my life. I was actually telling my partner, it is more stressful than any medical or health issue I've ever gone through. It's more stressful than, my doctoral project. It's more stressful than taking the licensing exam, or even any of my check rides with the FAA combined, what I'm going through right now. And, I've said, I used to think of myself as resilient because I could tap into these, like I just meditate and then I would, bounce back and all these things. And I'm finding it's becoming harder and harder and harder with what I'm undergoing right now to reset. And I think of it kind of like a glass. And obviously I didn't fill up the glass enough in between the draining. And now it's at like an all-time low. So it's really feeling like it's monumentous, to kind of climb and reset these negative emotions that I'm having. And I have this double whammy effect happening, where I know that if I stay in that space, it's affecting also all the energy around me. And therefore I'm creating more, pulling more negative energy in. It's like the got out of bed on the wrong side, right? And then missed the light. Now I'm late for this. Now, because you're generating that. You're telling the sphere around you, this biosphere, like, this is what I want to create right now. I want to create a lot of angst, a lot of heartache. And so I find that really fascinating. And you touched on something else that I find important too. I've shared this on this podcast. We have switched over to kerosene lanterns at night. We don't use any lights at all. And we've also started doing once a week, if not more, lighting off the fire pit and sitting around the fire pit with the kids and just kind of decompressing. If it's cold, we sit a little closer, the blanket's on, whatever. It is having a huge effect on everybody's mental health. It's insane.
Yeah, because you're down regulating. That's awesome. One thing that people don't realize, the benefits of sleep, because when you're that thinking, a lot of people think, we did a study in Australia with coal miners, because people thought using our light headset would hurt people's circadian rhythm. It doesn't. We beat any biohacker. My wife gets 97 scores, sleep scores almost every night. I'm not quite that good. I'm in the 90s, but she's always bragging. But the thing is, it's how you regulate your brain. And the reason that it's so important is as you go through these brain waves during sleep, which is natural. And of course, we mimic it with brain tap, but you're going to go through it with sleep. You're actually building neurotransmitters. So when you go into alpha, there's 54 of them. I won't go through all of them. But when you go down into alpha, you start making acetylcholine, oxytocin. These are the feel-good things. That's why breathing right before bed, doing like a 4 or 7 breath, as you release that stress. And then when you drop down into theta, this is when the magic happens. That's why GABA is the most researched neurotransmitter, because GABA is a precursor to DMT. So imagine every cell of your body has this God molecule they call DMT. And just like the reason we're not so active and we're not making BDNF, which is miracle growth for the brain, it's brain-derived neurotropic factor. These are things we got in abundance before technology. So I always tell people there's 4 things. There's thoughts, Toxins, trauma, and technology. These are the four things that are stopping our health right now. Technology can be good or bad. It's like a gun. If you're protecting yourself and your family, it's a good thing. If you're shooting somebody out of malice, it's a bad thing. So when you think about that brain, when you drop into delta, you only need 1 hour of deep sleep.
Wow.
If you get 1 hour of deep sleep and 2 hours of REM, you can sleep for less than 5 hours. But the research shows 6.5 hours is the perfect amount of time to sleep. Not 8 hours, but everybody has to find their own way. And if you're not measuring your sleep, at least occasionally, you're flying blind. Because some mornings I'll get up and I think I slept great. I look at my ring, my score, and it goes, hey, you had a problem here at this time of the night. And then, of course, if I do a meditation or a brain tap session, then I can reset. It's important we know when we're off target, because a lot of times we think we're doing all the right things, but our body keeps score. And now we can measure it with these technologies like HRV and things like that.
I have learned so much about the healing process of the body during the sleep cycles, and even how the kidney kicks on between 1 and 3 and the liver kicks on between 2 and 4. I mean, in this particular time zone that you're in or
Yeah,
whatever for your
yeah,
body. But it's
yeah.
really fascinating how if your sleep cycle is interrupted during that time, then essentially the kidney is not doing the flushing that it needs to do, or the liver is not doing the flushing that it needs to do. And I think that people are starting to finally see the driver behind all of the systems that are creating health and wellness. And it's just fascinating.
Yeah, I tell people everything's beads on a string. There's not one thing that's going to do it. You got to do the whole thing because it's pulling on all of them. So, when you sleep and you recharge, what happens is now that REM sleep that I was talking about 2 hours of, that's when your body's doing all the processing. It's taking your whole past, everything it knows about you, everything that happened yesterday, and saying what's most important, and it's planning your day. Now, if you did a little conscious commitment, you could plan your day while you're going to sleep, and you have to kind of live like a shaman, where the shaman says, hey, I'm going to live my life like today's my last, but I'm going to plan my life like I'm going to live forever. That's kind of the way we need to be thinking. So if you think about that, every night you get a chance to go into sacred space, that 6 inches between your ears, but that's only one brain. So you have three of them. You have a heart brain that has 40,000 different neutron cells. It acts as a unified field and it instructs the body twice as much as the body does it. We have a gut brain. That's the number one brain, because if you had a severed neck and you can't move your arms and legs, you're still digesting. Your body is still producing, almost everything is still working. It's just the signals from your thinking brain to your body is not there. But that gut brain controls so many things. And like you said, every second of every minute of every day, your body is receiving codes, not only from the sun, from the room that you're in. There's something called nose blindness. If you live near a dump or something like that, and somebody comes over and they go, how can you live here? It smells so bad. I go, I don't even smell it. That's not a good thing. Because
Right.
if you live in a mold home and maybe you got the flu or like symptoms and you thought something was bad, you went to the doctor, they gave you something to suppress it. You came back home and the brain goes, well, it must not be that meaningful. So I'll just suppress that, because you have this your brain's not only in these three organs, your brain actually, every cell thinks and has to respirate. So there's communication going on in a billion different ways that we don't have time to go over, but we can calm that all down by just taking moments out of the stress, because that's why we don't think as much when we're awake, because we have to react. We have to stay alive. We are the predecessors of a bunch of paranoid people. They didn't get eaten by the bear or the lion, or they didn't fall off the cliff. I mean, these are people that, our ancestors were survivors. And a lot of that survivor kind of mentality just bleeds through, and you think it's your thoughts. But I always like to say what the rishis say, who's thinking the thought that you thought you thought? So there's who is thinking that thought? It's, do thoughts, now they're saying that maybe thoughts arise out of this consciousness, that we are actually just receivers. Like you're saying, there's little cilia on the brain that they have actually like antenna that transmits and receives information. So it's not just like on some sci-fi movie where people are doing it. We're all tapped into this unified field.
And the biggest takeaway being so mindful of what you consume. Your physical energy space. What does it actually look like? Is it cluttered? That's going to affect you. There's no way that it can. Are you living in a city where people are constantly rushing by you, bumping into one another? You're being exposed to sirens and noise that would increase the stress amounts. I mean, I think even like you said, choosing to pick up your cell phone, one of two things is going to happen. You're definitely going to have a dopamine hit.
Yeah.
What is the outcome of that dopamine hit is really fascinating. Are you going to get excited and motivated? Like you said, dopamine can be a motivator, or are you going to perceive it as a threat that you're not doing enough, that somebody else has got this entire life that you don't have? And these can be short bursts of motivating skills to utilize, but at the same time, I think the majority of it is really negative on the body. I don't think that humans
Yeah.
were meant to have
One,
that
yeah.
nonstop.
One of the biggest things is when we wake up in the morning, we have a high cortisol trough. It should be the peak. We should be a little nervous in the morning. It's the first day of school. What are you going to see? What are you going to hear? What are you going to discover, right? But most people go and have a cup of coffee first thing. This crushes the cortisol trough. That means that now they become addicted to coffee. If they would just wait 2 hours for the brain to process that cortisol, norepinephrine, and dopamine, which you get with every morning, it's a blessing. But if you're doing it for your brain, it's inherently lazy. It's going to let you do it. Now at 2 o'clock, your temperature drops 2 degrees. This is all over the world, wherever you're at 2 o'clock. And it increases 2 degrees at 2 a.m. because it's clearing out the toxins. It's got to raise the temperature to burn out the toxins out of the cells. So as it's doing these things, our body, we're reacting to it. Now, what we do, unfortunately, is we run out and get coffee, tea, sugar, and whatever. And we bust through it because we're high achievers. We can't waste that time. Well, we did a study with Google and Microsoft. These were programmers, and after COVID, they want to know, how can we stop them from burnout? I said, have them do a session don't do a coffee break anymore. Do a brain break. And they said, what do you mean? I said, 20-minute session. And they go, we can't do that, 20 minutes. But when we recorded a 6-week study, which we published, Julie Arndt did a whole TED Talk on it. What we found was when they took that 20-minute break, they were actually 26% more work got done that day over the days they didn't do the 20-minute break. So even though we think we're working in the afternoon, if we don't have the energy, because lightning fast, right? We think a thought. Now, if you're slow or dull or you have anxiety, you're disrupting that pattern. So that message, it would take, let's say, a nanosecond, now takes 2 seconds. And so you're working, time is relevant, right? That's why Einstein said, if you're around a beautiful woman for an hour, it seems like a minute, or you're sitting on a hot stove for an hour. I mean, a minute, it feels like an hour, but when you're in your head doing those things, you're tripping out. You're not out here. You're inside your head. You think you're getting all this work done, but if you really look at it, and they've done so many studies on afternoon work, it's like we shouldn't even be working in the afternoon unless we take a brain break, because our brain gets all this stress. It's okay, get the stress, just like you talked about kids. When I measure kids' brains when they do computers, and my grandson and granddaughter do it, and I said, you can do an hour of that, but you've got to get your brain break afterwards. And we showed them I have a piece of technology called NeuroCheck. I can measure the nervous system, 9 parameters in 5 minutes. And I showed them, this is your brain before you started. This is your brain after playing an hour of computer games. He goes, why is my brain black now? Because you burned out all the sugars in your brain because you were playing this game that you thought was a game, but your brain thought it was real. And so all the reactions, your body went through all that trauma. I said, you wonder why you're done? You're like sweating, you're panicking. You didn't move. You're just there clicking with your fingers. And so when you think about this, it's okay to be stressed, but you've got to have that recovery. So many people are so focused on just doing. We're human beings first. We're not human doings. So, we've got to center ourselves, focus, and like tools like I created are one tool, but there's a million tools out there, that people need to start using, from breath work to mindfulness thinking to, the only problem is when we've measured about 30,000 brains in the last 10 years. And I've only met 4 people that know how to meditate. Now, people think they're meditating, but they don't realize that when you close your eyes, you shut down 30% of your brain's neural circuits. And now your default mode network kicks on. That's why you got to do some kind of breath work, maybe yoga before you do it, or Tai Chi or something. You got to get that energy out of your body, or it's like overdriving the system. And then you're just thinking those 90 thoughts you thought yesterday and the week before that and the month before that. And most of those, unfortunately, they say are negative. So, you want to get in there and be like a code writer. I always tell people, you're a software engineer for the human mind. You just don't know it. And our brain works on base code language. So when we start thinking positive, acting positively, our brain literally rewrites the code that makes us who we are on a daily basis.
Such a highly intelligent system. I mean, so completely miraculous. It's really fascinating. And you were saying a couple of things, and I'm like, okay, I'm kind of winning here. I don't have coffee. I've actually switched to tea, but I don't have any beverage other than sometimes even I don't have water for the first couple hours after I wake up.
Yeah,
So winning there. And I stop my client sessions by 2 o'clock every day.
that's
It's
awesome. You're
just the
doing it.
system that I'd found, and people get so angry, like, "Well, I'm in the middle of work. Can you work in do you take evening? Do you" Nope, my brain does not work at that time. I go out for a walk at 2 o'clock. That is what I do, I start my day at 5, and I actually don't even take clients until, usually 9 or 10, but because I'm downloading information and I'm, dreaming, and I say dreaming as in, like, thinking about things that I'd like to create in my life and how I might achieve that and things like that. And
Those are great. Yeah,
and
those are
I've
great for your
also
neural circuits, keeping them going. I mean, the whole thing is that you either plan your future or you get the default. And the default is everything you've done before. So if you want the default, and you can't complain then. The old guy that lived to be 100 years old, or 60 years old, and he's got all taking all these pills, he can barely walk, and he just, man, if I knew I was going to live this long, I'd have taken better care of myself. That's what I say. You've got to believe nobody has the return ticket. I don't know when I'm going to be called back to wherever I was, because energy doesn't die, it just transforms. So wherever I came from, I'm going to go back there or some other better place. I don't know when that's going to happen. But I do know it's going to happen, because everything in this world will someday decay and die. And that's a part of life. And we're not designed to handle it, because we're in a state of denial when death happens. That's why I jokingly said you died 1,000 times during this podcast, because you're not the same person you were. You said goodbye to that person. You didn't know how you said goodbye, but you're in a new space. But people keep carrying their past behaviors, attitudes, and beliefs with them. I call them dragons of the past. They drag them on, they drag them on, they drag them on. And basically they're revivicating them. Like in psychology, we talk about when we talk about problems, it actually exacerbates them. The brain doesn't know that they're good or bad. The brain only knows, hey, you're spending time on this. It must be meaningful, because its whole job is to protect you and preserve you. Your brain's not wrong or broken. It's not designed for the lifestyle you're living. So you have to intervene. We have to use the technology, like listening to your podcast, doing other things, that you have to feed the brain and give yourself permission to daydream. It's not a bad thing. When they told us that as kids, they didn't know what they were talking about, because the most creative people are the most happy people. They're the most prosperous people typically. They're okay within themselves. They don't have to be somewhere else. I mean, if I get 5 minutes to daydream, I'm in heaven. I don't care if the doctor's a little late. I'm gonna kick back, close
yeah,
my eyes, and
I'm
do a
gonna do my
little.
watercolor. Like, yeah, it's funny because clients come to me because I don't play with the victim mindset thing, and I'll let them go for about 7 minutes in session, and then I say, I've got to stop you. I'm not the therapist for you if you want to spend the next 50 minutes continuing on this trajectory, because it's not going to benefit you, and I'm not a babysitter.
Yeah, yeah. What I used to tell them is I let them do the same thing, because that's the way we're trained to listen first, right? And I said, you know what? It sounds like you've got that mastered.
You're
You
nailing
know,
it. Yeah.
and then I'd say, what if we talk about the solutions now? Because you got the problem down. I mean, you told that story so many times. I bet you could tell it in your sleep. I said, that's good. But what if we could rewrite that story? What if it took no time, energy, or effort on your part, just the capacity to think in infinite space? That in any moment in time, there's an infinite number of solutions to any problem. But if you keep focusing on the problem, your brain thinks that becomes a strange attractor in quantum physics.
It's
Every
so true.
every problem goes to that one solution. That's what addiction is, right? Every problem is out. The solution is a drink. The solution is a smoke. The solution is a whatever. And so, but if we stay in the infinite field, which is our quantum brain, wow, and say, just do something different. You can always go back to what doesn't work. That's what I used to tell them. You can always go back to what doesn't work. You've got that mastered. That's in your hip pocket. Let's do something different.
I was laying in the tub last night filled with kaolin powder and magnesium salts with the kerosene lantern on, listening to my Peter B. Helen soundtrack. Like, I was doing all the things, right?
Yeah.
And what I came up with was this one line that said, "Expose the most high path for me," because I was not on it, and I'm like, I'm in this weeds, I'm in this mud, I'm getting angry. And then one thought's leading to another angry thought. And that's reminding me it was all bad. And I was like, what is happening to me right now? This is
One
not
of, one of the
right.
things I tell people is you're breaking up against your emotional barriers, right? So everything is built around resistance in this reality. We're standing on the earth because our cells are vibrating at such a speed we don't fall through the earth because there's more space there than there's solid, right? So this resistance also happens mentally. So think about your life as a cube, and everything, you're comfortable in that cube. But sometimes you invite things and people into that cube. You needed them for a period of time, but you don't need them the rest of your life. So the cube has to expand. But until you clear out the cube, that's the detoxing, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, detoxing, forgetting, moving on, and those things. And then once you do that, the cube fills up, but it pushes them out. No longer they're a part of it. You don't see those same ads, you don't hear those same messages. And you're like, did I step into a different reality? Yeah, because you're tuned into infinite space. All realities exist. The big misconception people have is they create their reality. You create your perception of it. There's a power greater than us created every reality conceivable. Even the most bizarre ones like we're living right now, where people actually take drugs to change the way their brain thinks, that the side effects are far worse than the problem you had. So you have, we think about what's going on in our world. I told my wife, I said, this is like a really bad sci-fi movie. I don't even
It's
think
a
I would watch
total
this.
sci-fi movie. Yes. We don't participate in any brain altering substances, not even alcohol. I guess I need to correct. We do have some caffeine in our tea, but we've seen such a shift in our ability to receive information too. It's really wild. Like, I swear there were things that my brain couldn't even process when I was, having a glass of wine in the evening or whatever. And now that I'm not doing that, it's like it's almost expanded the ability for my brain to receive data from the universe, even. I mean, it's
Sure.
pretty fascinating.
Yeah. Most people don't realize that sugar, and of course, alcohol is high dose sugar, right? It's a neurotoxin. If it was put on the market today, they say it'd have to go through FDA approval and wouldn't. It'd be a class 3 drug. And people go, what do you mean? I go, have you ever been to a birthday party? The kids are all acting really good. Then they break out the cake and candy and the ice cream. And then you get Jimmy's beating up Joey and pulling hair and all that. And they go, your kid's bad. No,
It's
your
a
kid,
bar fight.
you've programmed him with food, or her, and they don't have a chance. Or they watch TV. When my grandkids were smaller, I'd tell my son, Alex, I'm going to come and get Eli and Sophie. No TV this morning. Because the TV repatterns the brain. Not just what they're watching. It's actually a frequency of alpha, but it's an incoherent frequency. So it dysregulates the brain. I always wonder who's watching my 4 to 6 hours of television every day. Because if the average person watches 4 to 6 hours, they don't realize their brain is going out of coherence. And people go, what do you mean? We have 2 hemispheres. In this hippocampus where the communication happens, when I ask you, I said, tell me about your favorite vacation with your kids, and you'll think about it, right? You don't just go back to a filing cabinet and pick it out of the filing cabinet. Your brain lights up in maybe 10 different places and then delivers it. If you don't have energy in the brain, it can't deliver that message because sugar's blocking it. That neurotransmitter has actually been taken out of the equation. So that information is still there, resident in your body, as in your physical cells, because your body keeps score. That's what psychosomatic illness is. But it's also in that biofield, like you talked about. When NIH said in 1999 that every person has a biofield that extends 3 feet around them. We now know it's 18 feet. But back then, and I got to meet the person who took that to NIH. They said in that, if you go to NIH's website, it says all illness starts in that field. Now, why are we giving people drugs when that's the 3rd generation? When people like Wim Hof, who does breathing exercises, they can put poison into his body. He can breathe his Wim Hof way, and he doesn't get poisoned. What is that? That's a superpower we have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What other superpowers do we have inside of us if we just, work with our natural self instead of this synthetic person that everybody's playing up to be in social media?
It's so neat to see Wim Hof and Van der Kolk and these guys, yourself, making the mainstream, so to speak, because I haven't had a TV in forever, right? Like, and I've been that woo woo forever. And so it's just so nice to see these topics finally coming to the light in a way where it's not off grid. It's the grid that we were supposed to be running in the entire time. And somehow it got completely hijacked from convenience, instant gratification, all of those things. One of the things I want to touch on real quick before you go, because I think that this is really important and people think I'm nuts about this, is I participate with homework because of exes and things like that we don't want to create a bunch of stuff. But I am really a firm believer that homework is actually dangerous to kids' development. I have a lot of thoughts about having them work basically from 8 to 3 and then come home and have to sit at a table and do more work until who knows in the evening. I'd really love to know your thoughts on that because I know you do have
Yeah,
some youth
it's
brain
terrible.
stuff.
When you go to school, they should do everything at school. I mean, they need recovery and they need to be out playing like kids do, working their muscles. And, when you learn do you speak two languages or just one language?
I speak one and a half.
Okay, all right. So your brain might still be going, but my science officer, he speaks six languages. We were in India doing a tour because of some research we did with Ames Bhopal. And he started speaking Hindi after about 3 weeks. And I said, Francisco, when did you learn Hindi? He goes, we've been here for 3 weeks. And it went click in my head. I go, you know what? We didn't learn a language by going to school. We learned a language by being around people, and the field learned the language. And because we would get where we wanted, all those connections, all those neural connections were happening. What they found out in neuroscience is if you learn two languages, like when your kids are younger, if you can get them to learn two languages and continue to use it, that circuit doesn't shut down. Which means now if you need to learn a new language like Francisco, who spoke six languages fluently, he has no accent in any language.
Wow.
And he's one of these super brains. He's my science officer. It's like, wow. But we all have that capacity. It's not like Francisco's got some special DNA. He's got the same base code as we all do. But he activated it differently growing up in Brazil, where he had to learn two languages, English and Portuguese. And then he became a flight attendant through college and learned all these others. So he got all these international routes and he just had a knack for it. So, we have this power. And I think what happens with homework is remember, some people are pessimists, some are optimists. If your child is a little bit of a pessimist and you give them homework, they're going to be living in that state of fear and doubt. And can they do it on their own? There's nobody to go to. The parents are stressed out. They don't have time to do this.
Yeah.
And they don't remember this new math and all this crazy stuff that they got going on, And so now the kid sees, or the parent says, don't worry about that. You're never going to need that when you get older. And now it's not about what they're learning. It's about how they're learning. So, I think homework should be to-dos, not sit down at the table and shut down your brain, because 20 minutes of setting is equivalent to having a cigarette, right? Used to be doctors were prescribing cigarettes. When I first started in my practice, I had people coming in saying, I said, how did you start smoking? Oh, my doctor told me I was stressed out. I need to start smoking. That's how the world changes. What people think is good and what people think are bad. Now we're finding out a lot of the things we thought were good were very bad for us. It's great to have 500 channels, but it'd be great to shut off at 12 o'clock. Like when I was a kid, if I could stay up to 12 o'clock, then it was like a victory dance because I got to see the Star Spangled Banner and
Right.
The station went off. You can stay up all day long watching whatever you want all night long. And the brain never gets a chance to take a break, never relaxes. In homework too, you do the homework, there's no immediate feedback. You think you did it right. And let's say that you're like me when I was younger. I just wouldn't do it because I didn't want the ridicule.
Right.
But then it was worse because I didn't do it, but I couldn't bring myself to do it until I realized that there are ways to self-check, make it fun. In my book, I give a lot of tips for students. But the reality is that our school system needs to change. It's still for the 1800s. There are schools out there that don't teach math and sciences until the person's brain actually passes a test that shows that their left brain has been evolved, because you're evolving every minute. You're changing, you're adapting. And some kids are more right brain. That's why they're creative artists. And then we say, oh, you're an artist. No, everybody's an artist. Some people just do it a lot better. We all have a left brain, like I proved, because I thought I was just an artist and I couldn't think. But what happened was when I started using it and learning with it, using like GSR machines for meditation, which you probably know what those are. You put your hand on them, you put it at 10 cycles. It makes a noise. We used it for sports, but my dad used it for us because I was stressed out about my teachers. I'd walk in school, I was just in a state of panic.
Yeah.
And then I went to a Catholic school, so homework was not something you occasionally got every day.
It was a ruler on the wrist, yeah, or on the knuckles. I'm so incredibly fascinated. I knew this was going to be a fantastic podcast. We always share the links in the notes, but where can people most easily get a hold of you and learn about BrainTap?
If they go to braintap.com, they can actually get a free 14-day trial at the app and start doing this. And 3 times a day is what's most important. In the morning, you need a brainwave called SMR. This is the alpha brainwave, high alpha. They get you going. In the middle of the afternoon, you need either a theta session or a gamma session. Now, we have those selected for you in the free trial, so you can go out there and try it. And then we have sleep sessions that downregulate, get you into that sleep cycle, because the more cycles you can have, most people only get 3 cycles. You should get 6 to 8 cycles of sleep. So if you don't get that deep sleep cycle, you don't cleanse the brain, you don't get that planning period. Think about it like everybody realizes that they're part of the human race, but they didn't realize it's a truism. You are part of a race. Every morning you get up, you're like at the 100-yard dash, you go, what do you mean I didn't train for this? What's going on? the old T-shirt that I got my wife. It says, "God never gives me what I can't handle. God must think I'm a badass." You know,
Yeah, I need
when
that shirt.
yeah. So when you think about this, is not something. I mean, you don't know what it is right now. We talked about a lot of things on the podcast, but you can go there. When you download that app for free, you actually get my older book, which is Thrive and Overdrive, for free. It's a digital version. You can read all about it. My new book, Brain Fitness Blueprint, is out with. That's from Hay House, so you have to get that from regular bookstores and Kindle and things like that.
I love that Hay House published you. They have such, I mean, all of their works are really fantastic and fascinating. I am just so impressed. I think I'm going to have to like come be an intern and hang out and just soak it in. It's amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And folks, you can check him out at braintap.com. Take advantage of that free trial. Learn about all of the things that you need to improve your brain health so you can be one of the billion brains that he is on a mission to improve. And thank you so much, Dr. Patrick. It was amazing to have you on.
Thank you.
The views expressed in this podcast aren't necessarily those of the Sky Talk Doc. They're here to challenge your thinking and inspire growth. Until next time, blue skies and tailwinds.